This is the final sesh for AQA AS Business Paper 1. So thinking about AS Business Paper 1, let's go through the structure of the paper, reminders and things to be aware of before you go into that exam, and then a models checklist and the formula that you need to know. Structure. So the paper will be set out as follows. Section A, 10 marks, multiple choice questions. Section B, 20 marks. Section C, 50 marks. That's a total of 80 marks and you have 1.5 hours to do that. Section A, 10 multiple choice questions. If you want some practice on those, check out the Year 1 MCQ video. It's there, the card's up there at the same time. Probably worth to keep an eye out for Herzberg in particular and hygiene and maintenance factors here. Mentions a common issue in the last few years in multiple choice questions, so might make a reappearance. Section B, calculation questions, so you're likely to have 3 or 4 markers, or maybe one of both. More practice on that, check out the numeracy playlist video, and as I said earlier on, the formulas required will be at the end of this video. And if you don't know where to find the numeracy playlist video, go to the section of BizCon Sesh that says AQA A-Level Exam Technique, Tips, Numeracy Practice, and then click on Numeracy Practice. You can see there in the yellow. Section B continued. So after you've had your calculation questions, you're likely to be followed up with an explain question for 4 marks. It could be explain one benefit or drawback of a certain business concept that you've covered this year. There's also likely to be, at the end of this section, a 5-marker analyse question. Now that 5-marker analyse question is often analysed one way or benefit or drawback. And so thinking initial point with then 4 logical developments to that initial point. And the key thing is to ensure you get 5 out of 5 and into the top level is that it's in context. And what I mean by that is there's no case study in these 5 markers, but there is a line above the question. It's very important you read that line. So you will have a line above the question. It could be, for example, I've made one up here, a manufacturing business, that's really just turned the question already in terms of the context, is considering changing its marketing mix. So it's giving you a specific focus for how you write the analysis in your answer. So apply to this line specifically in your analysis and development points. Also, I would watch out for any other words that are in bold, likely at the end of the question, which might force you to discuss a specific topic in your analysis. So just watch out in case it will clearly say 1 in bold, but it might say something else in bold in that question. It's very important that you target your answer around that word. And then remember, check the context above the question, just so you can ensure that you are in context when you develop your analysis and you get, bosh, 5 out of 5. Then we have section C. This is the biggest section of the paper, and it's where you'll find the case studies. There's usually a case study with a 9 marker and then a 16 marker, and then an additional case study, probably the same business and something has developed about the business, and then after that case study, the second case study, you'll have another 9 marker and another 16 marker. Be careful to distinguish between tables and figures. So if you're asked in the paper to reference a particular table, that's the table, not the figure. So don't get confused between those two concepts. Next thing is, of course, how many marks is this worth? It's worth 50 marks. Section C, in terms of the 9 markers, the questions might be analysed the causes, see red, or the benefits, see red. So therefore, if it's plural, go for 2 detailed paragraphs in context. Really need to pay attention to this. Avoid being descriptive. Do not simply repeat what happened in the case study back. That will not score marks. Section C. For the 16 markers, the questions might be framed as, to what extent is a business concept a good idea? Worth 16 marks there. Or it could be something along the lines of, advise if the business, whatever it is in the case study, should do something, some sort of concept. With section C questions, and we're thinking about those 16 markers here, structure and narrative is vital. So it's best to plan which way you are likely to conclude before you start writing your answer. Plan first. It's vital. The question could be as follows. Advise if the business should do something for 16 marks. You plan it and you decide, yeah, they should do it. So you've planned it, you've not engaged with the paper yet, you've just made a quick for and against, and you know that you think they should do it. So when we're thinking about paragraph 1 here, you might go, I think they should do it, whatever the concept is in the question. But on paragraph 2, try to avoid this. Try to avoid saying, I think they should not do it. Better is this. By doing it, this could lead to issues. Because it doesn't sound natural if you go, in one paragraph, I think they should do it, and then the next paragraph you're saying, I think they should not do it. The examiner might be thinking, make up your mind, which way are you going here? So if you've already planned, then just be subtle in your narrative. So paragraph 2 is not saying they should not do it. It's saying, by doing it, this could lead to issues. It's giving balance. So strike through on that first way of doing it. Don't go for the, I think they should not do it. Go for the, however, by doing it, this could lead to issues. Keep the narrative. You know in the conclusion, you will be saying, yes, they should do it, because you planned it. And then when we're thinking about paragraph 3, it's a justified conclusion, not just repeating the pros and cons. You are justifying why you went that way. So, if we're thinking about the overall answer, and then we'll go into how to do that conclusion in a moment, we're thinking, yes, they should, if you decide to go that way, of course. 6 to 8 detailed chains of analysis in context. Chains of analysis, therefore, this leads to, because, in context to the case study. Then the other side, there are issues. Again, 6 to 8 detailed chains of analysis in context. Then your conclusion. Very important if you want to get into level 4. Answer the question. Make a decision. Yeah, I think they should do it. Justify why you made that decision. Use the context. Use the data. Use the tables. Use the numbers. Then, the key flaw. Whichever way you went, it depends on this thing. It depends on this assumption. And then you might think, oh, to get 16 out of 16, overcome. How could the business overcome the flaws, the issues, you mentioned in paragraph 2? In the there are issues, you would have said the issues. Can you think of a way to overcome those issues? Because if you can do that, then you have a more robust conclusion. Or you might think about the it depends on point and why it might not be the case. And if the question suits it, you could take both those angles in terms of making your really powerful conclusion. The models checklist, let's just make sure we know all the models that you need to know. So, Taliban-Schmidt, Blake-Mouton, scientific decision making, decision trees, stakeholder mapping, market mapping, PED, price elasticity of demand, YED, income elasticity of demand, SDP, segmentation, targeting and positioning. And then on the other side, the extended marketing mix, Boston matrix, the product life cycle, stock control or inventory control chart, the ziggy-zaggy line, Hackman and Oldham, if we're thinking about job design, and then those motivational theories that clearly play off against each other, scientific management with Taylor, and then on the other side, Herzberg, and then Maslow to finish off those models. As promised, in terms of the formulas you need to know, let's go through all those formulas that you'll have to learn for AS Business. The first one, revenue equals price times quantity. Total variable costs equals variable cost per unit times by units. Total costs equals fixed costs plus variable costs. Profit equals revenue minus costs. Market capitalization, market cap, is the number of issued shares times by the current share price. Don't get confused with ordinary share capital, which will be the share price at the moment of flotation. Second set of formulas, net gain, that's expected value minus the cost of the decision. Expected value is cost of decision times by the probability, and then the sum of all the variations, usually 2, sometimes 3. Added value, that's sales revenue minus cost of bought in goods and services. Labour productivity, the output over a time period divided by the number of employees. Third set of formulas, unit costs equals total costs divided by number of units of output. Sometimes that's called average unit cost, clearly related to economies of scale. Capacity utilisation is actual output divided by your maximum possible output times by 100. And remember, the higher your capacity utilisation, the more efficient you are. ROI, return on investment, is profit from investment divided by cost of investment and then you express it as a percentage times by 100. Market share equals sales of the business divided by the total industry's sales times by 100. The next set of formulas, market growth equals change in size of business divided by original size of business times by 100. Variance is actual amount minus budgeted amount. Ignore that 7 there. Adverse, of course, is bad. Favourable is good. Be careful with costs in variance question. Lower equals favourable. Higher equals adverse when you're dealing with costs. It's the other way around there. Next set of formulas. Gross profit is revenue minus your cost of sales, those direct costs. Operating profit is gross profit minus operating expenses. Operating expenses, like marketing, for instance, would be an indirect cost. Then profit for the year is your operating profit minus your net finance costs, essentially interest from debt, minus taxes plus P-L-U-S, plus profit from other operations. And the next set, gross profit margin equals gross profit divided by revenue times by 100. Operating profit margin is operating profit divide revenue times by 100. Profit for the year margin is profit for the year divided by revenue times by 100. Contribution per unit equals the selling price minus the variable cost per unit. And remember, contribution per unit, you are contributing towards paying off your fixed costs. Total contribution is contribution per unit times by how many units sold. The next set, total contribution, which equals total revenue, subtract total variable cost. Break even, output, equals fixed costs divided by contribution per unit. The margin of safety is the actual level of output minus the break even level of output. Labour turnover equals the number of staff leaving divided by the number of staff employed by the business times by 100 because it's expressed as a percentage. The next set of formulas, employee retention rate equals employees who remained at the end of the period divide employees at the start of the period times by 100. Employee costs as a percentage of turnover is employee costs divided by turnover, which is essentially revenue, times by 100, and you're looking at efficiency of wages there. And then the final one is labour cost per unit, which is labour costs divided by units of output without a sesh. Good luck.